Thanks for the worship, Danielle and team. That was great. All right. Well, we're going to jump right in. We've got some work to do tonight. It's going to be fun. So make yourself comfortable. Make sure you've got a pen and a package handy and somebody you can partner up with. I'm going to even take my shoes off. All right. So, welcome to session 2 of 3 in our Apologetics series here at Summit Drive. Tonight, as we've mentioned, we're going to be exploring tactics in defending the faith. Last week, if you weren't here, or maybe if you were and you need a bit of review, apologetics is, we looked at what the word means and what it is like as a function in our Christian lives. In a nutshell, apologetics equips us to give well-reasoned responses to questions asked about Christianity. We want to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have when someone asks us to give a reason for our faith, like Peter says in 1 Peter 3:15. We learned we have a responsibility. Paul prays for Christians in Philippians and probably Christians of all time. In Philippians 1:9, that we would grow in our love of God in knowledge and depth of insight, knowledge and wisdom. Paul prayed that we would do this. We need to continue equipping ourselves, learning, so that the Holy Spirit can use us when the opportunities arise. Our methods can be adapted, but the message stays the same. Apologetics is the Great Commission applied to a post-Christian culture in an age of information. So tonight is about exploring the practical side of that. We're going to talk about using the knowledge we gain with wisdom. We're going to learn some tactics in defending our faith. We all interact with people on a daily basis. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, whether you're going to university or college, whether you're working a construction job, whether you are raising your kids at home, maybe you're talking to a neighbor. At all levels, we interact with people. So how do we incorporate apologetics into our conversations? Should we? How do we know when to or when not to? What if we don't know enough? At first glance, it might seem like a daunting task to share your faith. But it's actually not that difficult once you have a few simple tools of wisdom in hand. And we're calling them tactics tonight. Colossians 4, verses 5 and 6 says, "Conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders." I think that's on the next slide up there. "Make the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt, so that you may know how you should respond to each person." You might say that Paul's talking in this verse about our overall strategy, the strategy that he'd like us to use. But what does that look like in real life? Does it mean that from the time we meet someone, we have to set a stopwatch and for like 5 minutes and get them to the foot of the cross before the beeper goes off? Boom! Where's your 4 spiritual laws tracked? Do you have it? Do you carry it always? Is that what we're supposed to do? Absolutely not. That might be applicable in some cases, but last week we talked about the need to use apologetics lovingly. How do we best do that? Really? It's as simple as listening to people. Learn about them. Find out where their curiosity lies, or perhaps past hurts that are keeping them from believing in God. Once we genuinely get to know someone, we learn what landmines to avoid, ones that would cause the open door in an ongoing conversation to slam shut in our faces. Perhaps we can also gain an understanding of how to navigate them towards God's love. You don't have to be preachy or pushy. You don't have to be overly knowledgeable or witty. All you need to stay in the driver's seat of your conversation are a few simple techniques. These techniques we're going to learn tonight are simple, and they are not tricks meant to manipulate others. It's a simple way for you to listen and love the person you are talking with, and possibly even help them see the flaws in their objections to Christianity without pushing them away. So, what exactly is tactics then? Well, maybe we can talk about strategy first. It'll give you the big picture. We can move back to tactics. So strategy is the big picture. If you think of war, it's the large-scale operation of one's position prior to engagement. But we don't really want to use the war imagery. It does come first to mind when you talk about strategy. How many have played Risk? You think of your strategy ahead of time, right? Or Settlers of Catan. What is your strategy going to be? Within Christianity, we have amazing resources of knowledge available to us that can help us be adequately prepared to give reasons for our hope. Did you know that Christianity has strategic superiority because it holds up under scrutiny when compared, to other views? We have an excellent case, and we can answer life's toughest questions. As Christians, our strategy concerns the content, information, and reasons why someone should believe that Christianity describes the world accurately. This is what is encompassed in apologetics, both defensive and offensive apologetics. Now remember, we talked about this last week. These aren't feelings. These are the way we present apologetics. Defensive apologetics is responding to someone else's claim, and offensive apologetics is making the move or making the claim and then backing it up. So we have a lot of strategic concerns, and they include a number of issues for us Christians today, such as atheism and moral relativism, which claim no objective truth. Canada loves her religious pluralism, saying that all views and religions are equal. How does Christianity address that when we make certain truth claims? The problem of evil, competing views of Jesus' identity. Next week we'll look at whether Jesus really rose from the dead or not. Abortion, homosexuality, physician-assisted suicide, the accuracy of the Gospels. Are they historically accurate? So this is what's encompassed in our strategy. So tactics, on the other hand, is the art of arranging our strategic knowledge or deploying one's assets, the details. It's using wisdom. So for tonight's purposes then, tactics refers to the artful arranging of resources, specifically in maneuvering through conversations. You get to use your knowledge creatively. You need to style your response to objections. You need to guide yourself with sound reasoning, clear thinking, and assertive advocacy. Even if you're an underdog, you can gain the advantage over a superior opponent through clever tactical maneuvering. Check out the story of Gideon in the Old Testament. Tactics are not tricks. They are not ploys to force a non-Christian to submit to your view. They are not opportunities to belittle or humiliate your opponent. Tactics are an opportunity to present the truth clearly and cleverly, something that helps you navigate a conversation to your advantage, and it puts you in the driver's seat of your conversation. Who doesn't, everybody, once they learn to drive, they want to drive the car, right? You're going to hear that a lot. So tactics are going to put you in the driver's seat of your conversation. And they can allow you to stop a challenge and turn the tables. We want to gain tactical skills that will give us confidence in discussing our faith. We want to manage, not manipulate. We want to control the conversation. We do not want to coerce the other person into believing what we believe. We want to use finesse, not fight. So, last week we did an activity called the 10-second window. How many of you, raise your hand if you were here last week and did the 10-second window, just so I can get a feel for, okay. So, these were scenarios, real life, hopefully scenarios, and the idea was that you had to respond within 10 seconds to keep the conversation open. It was tough. Okay, so I'm going to just read the fourth one for you, and it's on physician-assisted suicide. So here's the scene. Picture the scene. You're out for dinner with friends, and the situation of a mutual acquaintance becomes the topic of conversation. One of your friends says, "It's so sad that Lacey's dad has been diagnosed with ALS. It's such a terrible disease, and people suffer so much as they are dying. At least the ban on physician-assisted suicide has been lifted, and Lacey's dad can choose the manner in which he wants to die. People should have that right. He can die with dignity and without suffering." So the challenge is, you feel terrible for Lacey's dad, and you don't want him to suffer either. You were having a great meal and you want the discussion to stay friendly. However, you feel like you need to spur on the thinking of your friends regarding the implications that physician-assisted suicide brings with it. What should you say? What can you say to get the conversation going in a friendly manner in 10 seconds? How many of you feel adequately prepared to respond to this? Anyone? That's a couple, that's good. Well, don't sweat it, because tonight we are going to learn how to respond to it in the 10 seconds, and it's really not that hard. Everyone can do it. Okay, so we're going to start learning these tactics, and a lot of this material I got from Greg Kokel, who teaches tactics in defending the faith. He's written a book, and I'm going to refer to it a bit tonight. There's a ton of great material in here, and we are only going to skim the first two tactics, okay? The first tactic, the first tactic is called the Columbo tactic. Does anybody know? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's not unusual for us Christians to get tongue-tied, not knowing what to say because you don't want to offend somebody. This Columbo tactic provides a step-by-step guide to help you ease into the process, and even the most timid of us can engage people in a meaningful way. So why is it called the Columbo tactic? Does anybody remember Lieutenant Columbo? Have they seen Columbo on TV? Okay. So if you haven't seen him before, we have a bit of a video clip.
Well, listen, thank you very much for this information. I'm kind of pressed, sir, so I'm going to run along. Do you remember the name of the real estate agent that showed him those houses?
It's Mary Cinch or something. She's in Beverly Hills. I'll think of it. I'll give you a call.
Much obliged, sir. Mr. Lamar, wonderful things you said at the funeral. Very touching.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. I'm going to have to make this fast, sir. Freddie bought a case of champagne. I checked the liquor stores on the same day to make it look cool to you. Would he do that? Would he spend $520 on a case of champagne and on the same day call you up for a loan?
Well, that surprises me. But I suppose he could have, being Freddie.
Because this wasn't a fantasy, sir. He actually bought the case of champagne.
Yes, I hear you, sir. I just wish I hadn't.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. Once again, thank you for the time. I'm sorry, sir. Just one more thing. You said that your nephew was planning on coming to your party,
Yes, sir.
and he called you to say you're going to be a little late.
That's right.
And that was a costume party.
Well, sure, you were there.
Had you told your nephew that?
Say what?
Did Mr. Brower know that your Halloween party was a costume party?
Oh, I'm sure he did. Why?
Well, that's probably nothing, sir. I'm just trying to understand why, if he was planning on coming to your costume party, why he didn't have a costume.
He didn't.
In his studio, sir, on the night of his death, no costume.
You sure about that?
Oh, quite sure, sir. I even went back after the funeral to have him wait there, and I searched again, and no costume.
Since it was Freddie, doesn't surprise me. See, costumes cost money. And he was a master boy. I suppose Freddie was just going to wear some of his old clothes, come as a eccentric billionaire like Howard Hughes. They say old Howard never wore anything fancy. Hey, you remember that party? How everybody thought you were in costume, you were wearing your own clothes.
That's a good point, sir.
Yes, sir.
Damn good point. Now, but explain it. Much obliged.
My pleasure.
Okay, we can stop it there. So, you get the idea. Columbo was an unobtrusive, bumbling, rumpled, brilliant detective. He appeared harmless to his enemies. Once his foe was at ease, then he would start asking questions. Do you mind if I ask you one more question? Oh, just one more thing. Hey, I'm sorry I'm making a pest of myself. I know I am. It's because I keep asking these questions. But I'll tell you, I can't help myself. It's a habit. Those are all Columbo lines. And he used all of the tactics in there that we're going to learn tonight. And that habit, that's a habit you want to get into, asking questions. The key to the Columbo tactic is to go on the offensive in a disarming way with carefully selected questions to productively advance your conversation. Simple guideline, if you hit a roadblock, ask questions. Never make an assertion when a question can make the same point. This can become second nature with planning and practice. The advantages are questions are interactive and they invite other people to participate. They make headway without requiring you to state your case. Questions shift the burden of proof to the other person, and it puts you in the driver's seat. This technique is so useful in our Canadian context. Whether you work at school, whether at work or at school, it allows you to move your case forward without preaching at others. My husband Colin uses this technique often at his work at TRU. He'll come home and tell me stories about people being gathered around his desk, discussing philosophy or religion simply because he asked a question. I like to call it stirring the pot. At one point during one of these group discussions around his desk, somebody said, "Oh, I just love these discussions. We should have a weekly group or something where we get together and talk about this stuff." That's still on our bucket list, but these are non-Christians who just enjoy the discussion of these life topics, simply because he dropped a question. Sometimes, when Colin asks a question here or there, people get mad at him, and they'll start condemning him or challenging what they assume are his Christian beliefs. But usually when he asks a question, he doesn't mention God, he just drops a question. But he can quickly point out to them at that point when they start condemning him for his Christian beliefs that he hasn't actually stated any of his views, he's just been asking questions. So he has nothing to defend if they're attacking him. Remember this though, once we make a claim in an argument, others have every right to ask us for evidence. Until then though, we are off the hook. Okay, take a look at your worksheets in front of you. The first one, we're going to do a lot of interactive activities tonight, and we're going to do some role playing. Now, let me say up front, some of you might feel like it's contrived and you don't really want to do it. I encourage you to get involved, and it's okay that it feels a little contrived. Think of it like learning an instrument. If you're a musician, you might identify with this. Whether you play piano or saxophone or whatever instrument, you have to spend time learning the technique. Scales, arpeggios, practice, practice, practice. So that when the music chart or a jazz chart is put in front of you, let's say, and a solo comes up, you can skillfully improvise with the best of them, adapting what you already know from practicing your technique to the music at hand. If you're more sports-minded, think of it as the more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle. That's what tonight is. Okay, so even if it feels a little contrived, that's okay. We're practicing technique so that when you go out on the battlefield or when you go out and you're ready to improvise a solo, you're ready to go. And you can do so skillfully. Okay, so the first interactive, it asks you to sum up the Columbo tactic in one sentence, Take a few minutes to discuss with the person next to you how you think the tactic works and some advantages the approach might be. You have about 2 minutes. Go. Okay, I'm going to wrap that up. We've got a sentence summarizing it written down so you can take it home. Okay, so the Columbo tactic has 3 applications. 1, we're going to gain information. 2, we want to reverse the burden of proof. And 3, you can indirectly exploit a weakness or a flaw in somebody's reasoning. Now, we only have time to skim over the first 2 tonight. I encourage you to dig deeper. This book is available through Amazon. There is, if you want to go even deeper than that, there is a study that you can do for several weeks, and it takes you further into logic and flaws in people's logic with some fun as well. But we're going to look at the first 2 tonight: gaining information and reversing the burden of proof. So think about this. Hugh Hewitt, in his book In But Not Of, says, ask at least a half dozen questions in every conversation. This skill at inquiry, he goes on, this is still his quote, this skill at inquiry will immediately mark you as different and attractive. When you ask a question, you are displaying in the person asked. And in most settings, this is a great boon to the pride and the self-worth of the person being asked. Most people are not queried on many, if any, subjects. Their opinions are not solicited. To ask them is to be remembered fondly as a very interesting and gracious person in your own right. Once developed, the habit of asking questions will inevitably give you advantages in every setting. You will obviously leave most situations with more information and friends than when you arrived. And being an asker allows you control of situations that statement makers rarely achieve. Being an asker allows you control of situations that statement makers rarely achieve. Once you learn how to guide a conversation, you have also learned how to control it. You can express your own opinions as questions, and every human emotion can be conveyed this way. Did you know that? That's kind of cool. Every human emotion can be conveyed through questions. An alert questioner can judge when someone grows uneasy. Don't stop, just change directions. So, the first application of the Columbo tactic is gain information. Sometimes you just need more information to know how to proceed further in your conversation. This is the simplest way to use the Columbo tactic. It's effortless and it puts absolutely no pressure on you. When used to gain information, this can be a conversation starter. It saves you, or it buys you valuable time to gather your thoughts and helps you know how to proceed. And it gives you information for further encounters. Oh my goodness. There is a disadvantage to eating supper right before you speak. Pardon me. So, how do you gain information? First way to ask a Columbo question, it's really simple. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? This is a clarification question. It tells you what a person thinks so that you don't misrepresent their view. It is so important to develop this skill because misrepresenting the other person's view, even by accident, is a serious misstep. When we misrepresent someone's view, especially when we make it appear weaker than it is, not only do we come across as insincere and like we're not really listening, but we're committing what's called the straw man fallacy. We set up a lifeless imitation of our opponent's view, straw man, and then we can easily knock it down. Instead of fighting our opponent's actual view, you might end up giving a brilliant refutation of a view that your opponent doesn't even hold. So, ask for clarification. Make sure your question, what do you mean by that, is delivered genuinely and inquisitively and mildly. What do you mean by that? That's probably not the tone of voice you want to use. I played around with putting different tones on, stresses on different syllables. It's kind of funny. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? So, again, there's that thing where you feel like maybe it's a little contrived, but hey, maybe you want to practice it before you throw it out there and it comes out in the wrong tone. So, asking this question forces your opponent, I don't want to use the word opponent, it forces the person to be precise in their meaning. So often people object to Christianity for reasons they haven't completely thought through themselves. They're just regurgitating a soundbite. So here's some examples of Columbo question number 1 in action. I'll give you a claim, and then I'll give you a way to ask the question, because you can adapt, what do you mean by that, to suit your situation. So the claim is, there is no God. Columbo response might be, what do you mean by God? If they mean an old man with a beard who sits on a throne in the sky, well, we don't believe in that kind of God either. Here's a claim. All religions are basically the same. Columbo responds, really? In what way are they basically the same? Now here the point is not to determine the similarities between religions, because often there are similarities, but whether the similarities are weightier than the differences. Sometimes they're just mutually exclusive. Here's another claim. You shouldn't force your views on me. Columbo responds, specifically, how am I forcing my views on you? Get them to answer that. Claim, that's just your interpretation. Response, what do you mean by just? Although you are giving your interpretation, your understanding of what the true meaning of the text is, or what have you, you need to find out if they believe all interpretations are equally valid, and yours is just one of them. Here's another claim. Reincarnation was taken out of the Bible. Your response might be, what do you mean reincarnation was taken out? Here you're trying to determine how someone removes lines of text from thousands of handwritten documents circling around the Mediterranean region in the first 4 centuries. The more copies we have, and there are thousands, the easier it is to determine discrepancies. Did you know that? It's actually in our favor that we have thousands of New Testament documents. It's kind of cool. Claim, the Bible has been changed over the years. Columbo response, how do you think it's been altered? They made the claim, you need to find out what they believe, or if they're just throwing that out at you. You need to find out also if they're familiar with the process of written transmission of ancient text, or are they just repeating what they've heard? Claim, how could God exist when there's so much evil in the world? Columbo responds, what do you mean by evil? Or, what in your mind is the conflict? Now listen, the question of evil doesn't provide evidence against God. It actually provides evidence for God. That's something you might want to look into. God must exist to provide the absolute standard by which evil is measured. Did you know that? So it's important in each case to have them spell out their objection. Okay? What do you mean by that? Accomplishes several important objectives. Again, and I'm kind of repeating myself, but here I want you to hear these things. It engages the non-believer in an interactive way. It makes the non-believer feel good because you're showing genuine interest in his view. It forces the non-believer to think more carefully and precisely, maybe for the first time, about his intended meaning. It gives you valuable information about the person you're talking to. And it positions the non-believer in a defensive position while placing you in the driver's seat. Now listen, when you ask the question, make sure you pay attention to the response. And if the response is unclear, just follow up with more questions. You can say something like this: let me see if I understand you on this. And then feed back the view to make sure you've got it right. This way you can escape the charge. You're twisting my words when someone offers that challenge. You can say, how could I twist your words by asking a question? I'm simply asking for clarification precisely because I don't want to twist your words. I want to understand what you're saying, and I want to understand your view and its consequences. Okay, by the way, don't let them merely repeat what they've said. So the claim, a little hot here. The claim, you're intolerant. Colombo response might be, what do you mean by the word intolerant? I mean you're intolerant. Well, that's not going to get you anywhere, so don't let them get away with that. Don't underestimate the power of this question. What do you mean by that? Use it often. In fact, you can use it all day long till the cows come home, and there is absolutely no pressure on you. Okay, here's where we're going to do that 10-second window activity again. It's the next activity, next page. I use both sides, I think, so pair up with someone near you. Role play these scenarios using the first Colombo question. Develop a quick response to each scenario using some variation of, what do you mean by that? Make it particular to the issue at hand. You've got 4 minutes. Go. Okay, sounds like there's lots of good discussion going on, but for the sake of time, I have to push ahead. Learning how to ask this first question, what do you mean by that, is your key to productive conversations. People often don't know what they mean by the things they say. Often they're merely repeating sound bites or slogans, and frequently their statements, questions, opinions, or points of view are so muddled that it's impossible to proceed in conversation without asking for clarification. Asking the question, what do you mean by that, is the simplest way to clear up the confusion while giving you time to size up the situation and gather your thoughts. I encourage you this week, make a point of asking half a dozen questions in a conversation with someone. You'll be amazed at how much you learn about the person, and perhaps you'll make a few friends too. You never know. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second application of the Colombo tactic, and that is reversing the burden of proof. I'm sorry, again, this is just an introduction to these things. I would love to be able to spend all evening just on the first one, but we're going to move on. The first application of the Colombo tactic helped you understand what a person thinks. This second application, known as the reversing the burden of proof, helps you learn why he thinks the way he does. So, what is the burden of proof? What does that mean? Okay, take a look at page 5. We have the burden of proof interactive. We need groups of 4 for this activity, so there might be some shuffling around here. 3 or 4. So read the statements provided, there are 3, and then go down to the bold questions and discuss them. Don't do part 2 below yet. Okay, so read those through and then discuss the questions in bold. I'm going to give you another 4 minutes. Go. The burden of proof is the responsibility that someone has to defend or give evidence for his or her view. There is only one rule. Whoever makes the claim bears the burden. Whoever makes the claim bears the burden. Don't allow yourself to be thrust into a defensive position when the other person is making the claim. I hope over this next few minutes you're going to be set free from fear of being a Christian in the classroom. This rule, the bearing the burden of proof, means there are no more free rides for the non-believer. It is not the Christian's responsibility to refute every story a non-believer can spin and every claim he can manufacture. When your opponent advances a view, make him or her defend it. Steer the burden of proof back on their shoulders where it belongs. Make them give you their arguments, not just their points of view. Does that make sense? Think about this. Challenges to Christianity thrive on vague generalities and forceful but empty sound bites. The burden of proof tactic forces people to be more explicit. Remember, it is your opponent's job to defend his unbelief and prove his views. It is not your job to refute them. Here's a saying to remember: an alternate explanation is not a refutation. An alternate explanation is not a refutation. It is not enough for someone to contradict your view by offering a different explanation that appeals to him more or saves his worldview, even if it's a believable one. That might be a good start, a legitimate first step, but he must take it further by showing why his alternative view is more reasonable than your view. Your opponent must shoulder the burden of proof for his own view. Now, remember, on the other hand, reversing the burden of proof is not a trick to be used to avoid defending your own claims. If we make a claim, we have to answer that claim. When we ask questions, we want to eventually be able to answer some of them. We have a responsibility, but so do they. Okay, here's one more discussion, and then before we start the discussion, I need 2 volunteers to be willing to do a reader's theater up here. 2 volunteers, James and a John. It can be a female James or John, doesn't matter. Not tonight, I'll call you Jill or something. Okay, we got 1 and 2, good. Okay. Okay, so I'll call you up in 2 seconds. First, I want you guys to take a moment. Page 6. Think, pair, share. Take a moment to reflect on the burden of proof concept that we just talked about and the role it plays in conversation. How would you explain it to another person? What is the tactical importance of understanding this concept? Turn to a partner and rehearse together what you've just learned. Be sure to clarify why an alternate explanation is not a refutation. So basically, you're just discussing this and rehashing it so that you can put into words what you've just heard. Okay? You've got about 3 minutes, and then we're going to do a little reader's theater. Do you want to just introduce yourselves to us?
I'm Zed.
And you're going to be John. How about?
And I'm John.
And you are. Do you want to use that mic? No, right here. You can use. Oh, sure.
I'm 1-0.
And we'll have her be James. Okay, go for it, guys.
I wish our government would put more funding into stem cell research.
Isn't stem cell research immoral?
You haven't been listening to those religious pro-life people, have you? They're such extremists.
What's extreme about saying stem cell research is wrong?
Because stem cell research would really help a lot of people.
But doesn't stem cell research kill innocent human beings?
You think embryos the size of the period at the end of this sentence are human beings?
Sure, they're human beings.
No, they're not. They're just protoplasm.
Yes, they are. They're every bit as human as you are.
No, they're only potentially human.
They're already human.
I disagree. You and I are human beings, and embryos are different.
Okay, give them a hand. So, who bears the burden of proof in this scenario? What was that? Both. Right, were they getting anywhere? No. Good. All right. Hold that thought then. So, bearing the burden of proof. Columbo question number 2 is this. How did you come to that conclusion? So, how did you come to that conclusion? This question graciously assumes that the non-believer has actually reached a conclusion. That he has reasons for his view and has not merely asserted it carte blanche. gives him a chance to express his rationale if he has one. It will also give you more material to work with in addressing his objections, either then or later, if you need time to go home and study. Ultimately, it shifts the burden of proof to the other person, which is exactly where it belongs. Now remember, many people have never thought about their views, and they don't know why they hold them. So don't be surprised when you ask this question if you get a deer in the headlights look. Just give them time to regroup. Be gracious. Alternate questions, another way, or other ways to ask, how did you come to that conclusion, or why did you say that? What are your reasons for holding that view? What makes you think that's the right way to see it? Why should I believe what you believe? Think about this. You can spend hours helping someone carefully work through an issue without ever mentioning God, Jesus, or the Bible. This does not mean that we're not advancing the kingdom. It's always a step in the right direction when we help people discover the truth. Have you ever heard the saying, all truth is God's truth? It gives them tools to assess the bigger questions that will eventually come up. Further, when we challenge people to think carefully, we acknowledge that they bear the image of God. This affirms their intrinsic worth. Consider the responses you can make to the following claims with Columbo 2. So here's a claim. You can never know anything for sure. Columbo 2. You know that for sure? Why should I believe that? Can you give me a good reason why I should believe nothing can be known with certainty? Claim. Morals are just an invention of culture. There are no objective moral rules. Question 2. What would be your evidence for that? Another claim. The miracles of Jesus in the Gospels were just an invention of the early church. Question 2. Give me some of the reasons you think that's true. Reincarnation was taken out of the Bible. What support do you have for that idea? Okay, now remember James and John up here? You guys each get to be James and John. You don't have to read through the whole thing, but start maybe halfway down. Pick who you are with a partner, and insert this Columbo question number 2, and see if you can get this conversation to be a little more productive between the two of them. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that, okay? Practice. How did you come to that conclusion? Okay, for the sake of time, we are moving on. I hope you got a chance to kind of practice Columbo question number 2. So, when you use the burden of proof tactic, you want to beware the professor's ploy. This is going to be especially useful to students in the room. Some professors, many professors, depends where you are probably, are fond of taking pot shots at Christianity with remarks like, the Bible's just a bunch of fables, just myth, even if the topic matter has nothing to do with religious issues. Well-meaning believers sometimes take the challenge and attempt a head-to-head duel with the professor. But this approach is rarely successful, unless of course you're starring in God's Not Dead. How many people saw that movie? Did anybody go, oh my goodness, I could never be that guy? Well, the good news is you don't have to be that guy. You just use the Columbo questions. Basic rule of engagement governs exchanges like these. The guy with the microphone wins. Yay for me tonight. So, that's the rule. The person with the microphone wins. Never attempt a frontal assault on a superior force. The professor always has the strategic advantage, and he knows it. Don't get into a power play when you're outgunned. There is a better way. You don't have to disengage. Instead, use your tactics. Raise your hand and say, Professor, what do you mean by that? Next ask, how did you reach that conclusion? Simple, right? Make the teacher, the one who is making the claim, bear the burden of proof. This approach enables you to stay engaged while definitely sidestepping the power struggle. The professor's ploy comes into play when the professor responds by attempting to make you shoulder the burden of proof. She may sense your maneuver and respond by saying, "You must be one of those Christians who thinks the Bible is the inspired word of God. Okay, since I'm a fair woman, why don't you prove to me and to the rest of the class that that's true? Prove it." In one quick move, she's cleverly switched the burden of proof back on you, the student. Don't take the bait. You aren't making the claim. She is. She must defend her own claim. She's the teacher after all, right? So you can respond to the professor's ploy with dignity and tact. If he shifts the burden of proof on you, just calmly respond by saying, "Professor, I haven't revealed anything about my views. And my views don't really matter right now. You're the teacher. You made a strong claim about the Bible. I'm just trying to learn your reasons for it." If he gives an answer, thank him for it, and either ask him another question or let it go. Notice that the burden of proof tactic totally takes the pressure off of you, but still keeps you in the driver's seat. You don't have to be an expert on every subject. You can't be. If you keep the burden of proof, if you keep the burden on the other side when they're making the claim, you don't have to have all the answers. You can be effective even when you know very little if you just ask the right questions. So we've learned tonight the two most important tactical questions you can ever ask are, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Keep in mind that your tone has to be engaging in conversation and conversational. You want the outside to match, hopefully, the inside, the love of Christ that you have for the person that you're talking to. These questions allow us to probe deeper while remaining friendly. They keep you in the driver's seat while the other person does the work. It's kind of nice too, right? The combo tactic, let's see, what time is it? There's so much to say, it's just not enough time. I'm going to go down here. Okay, so don't sweat it if you don't know where to go next. Let's see, you might have to catch up to me, but I'm not sure. Maybe one slide. There is a third Colombo tactic and more ways to understand the flaws in court arguments and accusations, but as I said at the beginning, that requires more time than we have. You can read it further in this book. I'll show you again. Tactics, the game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. They also have a handy little app for your phone, which I can't show you because it's too tiny, but if you want to come see me after, I can show you. They have some great, simple arguments for abortion and pro-life. It's called the SLED argument. And they have the tactics on here too. Anyways, this will take you deeper and help you learn a few more tactics. I encourage you to dig deeper. Some of you did some digging deeper last week. I was talking to you earlier. It's good. So, reflect on this. You don't have to get to the foot of the cross in every encounter. Most people need time to consider what you've talked about. That's healthy. After all, if people get to the cross too quickly, they may leave it just as quickly. In regards to evangelizing, you don't know how long an encounter will last. It might be just a simple exchange. It might be a full in-depth conversation. Pray for wisdom and assess what is one thing you can say or one question you can ask in order to leave that person with something to think about. Because the gospel is worth thinking about. Greg Koppel, who wrote this book, said, "I want to put a stone in his shoe. All I want to do is give him something worth thinking about. I want him to hobble away on a nugget of truth that annoys him in a good way. Something he can't simply ignore because it continues to poke at him." So, what do you mean by that? how did you come to that conclusion? I encourage you to practice those this week and help build the kingdom. I also want to invite you guys to next week. We are going to talk about the case for the resurrection, and it's a good week to bring friends who are non-believers, because we are going to present the case for the resurrection almost from a skeptic's point of view. And there's enough evidence out there to prove the resurrection using the minimal facts that everybody agrees on in this academic world, who are non-Christians and Christians alike. And so please come, it's an exciting topic and our faith hinges on it. And I look forward to doing that. Thanks for having me tonight.